Good evening, everybody. Glad you could be here. Most of you know me, for those small few of you who don't. Hello, my name is Scotty Gatos. I am a member of the Austin Philosophy Discussion Group. This is being facilitated by the Austin Philosophy Discussion Group. However, there are members here today who are not in that particular group, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody is obviously welcome, and I'm glad you're here. So, for those of you who are not at all familiar with Objectivism, don't worry. The idea today is to give you a very simple, broad overall idea of what Objectivism is. That is the whole point. So worry not if you don't even know anything about it or never even heard the word, that's fine. To give you an idea of Objectivism, of the kind of essence of it, we'll start with a quote. So if you look at the first page, you can follow along. There's a nice outline that I'll be following as we go. And that quote is as follows: "Man, every man, is an end in himself, not a means to the ends of others. He must live for his own sake, neither sacrificing himself to others, nor sacrificing others to himself. He must work for his rational self-interest, with the achievement of his own happiness as the highest moral purpose of his life." And that comes from an article called Introducing Objectivism, the Ayn Rand column, the publication source. So, in a nutshell, that describes the basic or essence of objectivist philosophy. Now, we can't go home yet. There's a whole lot more to talk about. But before we talk about those other things, I do want to say thank you first to the Austin Philosophy Discussion Group for getting all this whole thing started. One of its members over here, Leonard, originally conceived of the idea, so that's why we're here today. Also, thank you to the Austin Objectivists. These guys have been great for helping me to learn more about the philosophy, and I certainly appreciate that opportunity. And then finally, I'd like to say thank you to Mitchell. Mitchell is my partner, and Mitchell has not only edited this for me, but has helped me to learn a lot more about Objectivism, and he certainly knows more about it than I do. I love him for helping me and for many other things as well. So thank you, Mitchell. So to give you an outline of where we're going, the outline is as follows. We're going to start with metaphysics. Now, metaphysics is just one branch of philosophy that talks about the nature of existence. And then after metaphysics, we're going to talk about epistemology, where epistemology is the branch of philosophy that talks about knowledge and learning. Then we're going to move on to ethics. And ethics is the philosophical branch that deals with decisions. What is the right decision? What's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do? And then we will move on to a subset of ethics, which is politics. And politics is simply the study of how man should govern. Pass that along, please. All right. And then once we finish with those four branches of philosophy, we will then go on to just some discussions of additional topics that may or may not fit easily into those other subjects, but I just felt like it would be best to separate them. So we'll begin with metaphysics. Objectivism is pretty good about taking each of these particular schools and narrowing them down to a very simple word or phrase. And for metaphysics, that word or phrase is existence exists. Now, it's a pretty self-explanatory statement, granted, but the implications of it are huge. The implication of this statement is simply that everything you see around you is. The chair is, the table is, the knife is, etc. Regardless of whether I am aware of it, regardless of whether I call it something, it is. And all things are like that. They simply are. Now, existence itself, according to Objectivism, is an irreducible primary. There is no way to get around it, to find something beneath it, to reason below it, to find where it comes from. Because when you try to do that, you run into this nice little circle. We'll talk a little bit more about that circle soon. But I do have a statement from Leonard Peikoff about this. You're going to find that there are quotes throughout this lecture. Peacock is the intellectual heir to Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand is the person who came up with Objectivism in the first place. So he wrote an article called The Analytic Synthetic Dichotomy, and this is what he wrote on existence. Existence is a self-sufficient primary. It is not a product of a supernatural dimension or of anything else. There is nothing antecedent to existence, nothing apart from it, and no alternative to it. Existence exists, and only existence exists. Its existence and its nature are irreducible and unalterable. So, don't take it from me, take it from the objectivist source. Now, existence itself implies a corollary rule. Now, corollary simply means that if I have some proven idea, then something else kind of follows from that naturally. And that corollary is the law of identity. If something exists, then that thing that exists has an identity. It is what it is. Coming back to those statements, the knife is the knife, the chair is the chair. Abstractly, we can say simply that A is A. And that's all there is to that. It's a very simple statement, but the implication of it is that coming back to that perception of something, if I'm looking at the table, it's the table. If I'm not looking at the table, it's still the table, regardless of whether or not I'm conscious of it. The same goes for everything else that exists. So the point here is simply that existence and all things identifiable in existence are independent of my consciousness or your consciousness or anyone else's consciousness. To give some examples of this, let's go to the classic saying, when a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And objectivists would say that when a tree falls in the forest, well, it makes a sound wave. And a sound wave is a sound wave. And the reason I state it that way is because you could call it sound, but the problem is people are going to debate about what a sound is and is not. And so rather than even get to that, I'm simply stating what is the thing that happens when the tree falls. There's a wave, and that wave travels and may or may not hit somebody's eardrum and may or may not cause that eardrum to vibrate and therefore produce sound. That's not the point. The point is, it makes this thing, and I might call it a sound wave, I might call it a what's it, doesn't matter. It makes this thing, and this thing exists, and that's all there is to it, metaphysically speaking, regardless of whether somebody perceives it. On the flip side of that, coming back to another example, if 50 million people say that something is true, for example, if 50 million people say that the moon is made of cheese, that doesn't mean that the moon is made of cheese anymore, that the moon may be made of pillow stuffing. The problem with following that train of thought is that by believing that any number of people saying something makes something true means that we get a reversal of that relationship of consciousness observing existence. Existence is independent. So regardless of however many people may say something, if that's not metaphysically true, it doesn't matter. They can still be wrong. Now, it's obviously tempting to believe 50 million people, or 51 million people, or any number of people who may disagree with me on a single point, and I'm the only person who disagrees. But that doesn't matter. What matters is, whatever is the truth is independent of my consciousness and the consciousness of those 50 million people. So the result of this, the result of all of this stuff to understand about existence is an understanding that within existence, because everything is what it is, there is no such thing as a contradiction. If the chair is the chair, then the chair is not a non-chair. It's not possible. Okay? Some people might call it a different name. That's fine. There are different languages in the world to refer to things, and that's fine. But the chair is the chair. It's not a non-chair. And it's important to state it that way because the only way that I think is the clearest way to refer to a contradiction is that something is and is not, or non. So a very particular way of referring to it. But I'll come back to more to that later, but the big thing